Okay, our next panel title is Elitism and the Suppression of the Masses. And we will have a free panelist from the Free Market Roadshow. First of them is Barbara Kolm. Dr. Barbara Kolm is a legal libertarian in Europe. She is the vice president of the Austrian Central Bank, director of the Austrian Economic Center, which is #1 independent think tank in Austria, and positioned as among the top ones in the world. She is president of the IAC Institute and professor of Austrian economics at the University of Donja Grossia, I hope I pronounce it right, in Montenegro. Barbara will join us live on video from Austria, and we are grateful to all the inventors, developers, investors that made all of this possible, and especially to Eli that sits on the technical here. With Barbara, we will also have, after Barbara will give us her talk, Mr. Hans Unterdorfer. Hans will join us also by video from Austria. Mr. Unterdorfer is a banker with a broad experience in financing and investment strategy. Since 2011, he is the CEO of Tiroler Sparkasse in Innsbruck, Austria. And with the video panel, we will have a real live friend that came all the way to Israel, Mr. Gia Jandieri from the New Economic School in Georgia. And Gia is an economist, graduate from 2 universities in Georgia. He worked at the State Audit Office, Central Election Commission, very important, at the Parliament of Georgia, and the Anti-Corruption Agency. In 2001, Mr. Jandieri co-founded and since that time has been the vice president of the New Economic School in Georgia. So please, Barbara, you can take the lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Boaz, and distinguished member of Knesset, Mrs. Sharon Haskell. Thank you very much for your inspiring speech. Dear Boaz, it's a pleasure, and thank you to collaborate again with you, with the Ayn Rand Center Israel, but also with the Ayn Rand Institute, and of course the Israeli Freedom Movement. Apologies for not being with you live. Unfortunately, I have a positive PCR test and could not travel to Israel, but hope to be out of prison very soon again. It's been a pleasure to work with you all for the past years and to finally have a live event again in not only in Tel Aviv, but also the one on Monday at Basheva, and we hope to have many more. Yaron, thank you for joining the roadshow and for presenting the books and Ayn Rand's work so lively. Presenting via video screen, as you know, is a little bit boring, but the topic, nonetheless, elitism and suppression of the masses, is definitely more important than ever. So there are 3 interlocking themes these days. One is COVID-19, of course. Another is energy politics and the Russian-Ukraine issue that we see these days. And in each of these areas, elites have claimed to act in the name of people. Yet in each of these areas, they have actions have produced outcomes that harm people. Elites, and apologies to the present politicians, both in politics but also experts in medicine, have taken a variety of measures and changed their narrative multiple times in order to deal with the virus. So a similar moving of the goalposts phenomenon can be observed when it comes to changing the narrative on inflation recently. You might recall that first it was that we would not see inflation. Then it was conceded that we are seeing inflation, but it would only be transitory. And then it was argued that inflation would actually be good. but it has also been argued that inflation is actually bad. So inflation has also been blamed on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, even though it predates the invasion. So we have to be very careful of how we frame the terminology. So, for example, no reliable study proves that lockdowns have had a substantial positive effect. However, what is certain is that they have produced unemployment, disrupted supply chains, harmed the economy, and most importantly, enterprises, and led to increased rates of depression and domestic abuse. Any country respecting freedom should have declared that people are free to do as they wish, as the member of the Knesset has pointed out with regards to the use of marijuana. So we actually should be free to do as we wish, and we should make our own choices as long as we do not harm others. This is what Hayek has so importantly pointed out, that we are self-responsible and should make our own decisions. Again, as long as we do not harm others, and we should be allowed to make those decisions. And we have seen countries that were respecting freedom, for example, in Sweden, and we have seen countries that have not. We have seen different outcomes. In Sweden, for example, everybody was bashing them at the beginning, and then it turned out that their numbers, of course, they had death tolls, unfortunately, but they were not that high as many other countries that locked their people in, like Austria, Germany, 24/7. And then, of course, we have seen very positive effects. One of the positive effects were the vaccines. So they appear to have had an effect, but we remain uncertain how effective they are in the long run, not to mention how many boosters will be required. Normally, people are vaccinated so they can live a normal life. By contrast, the COVID vaccine was unique in being the only vaccine that still required everyone to comply with lockdowns, mask mandates, and other ineffective measures. And in light of all these uncertainties, vaccine mandates appear excessive and their enforceability is questionable. Austria, for example, forced vaccination, and now they had to change the law again, and so did Germany. So it would be better to exercise restraint and remember Hayek's warning about the pretense of knowledge. Remember his Nobel Prize speech that he gave in Stockholm, when he reminded us of not that we do not know everything, that there is no such thing as full information, even in modern times with AI and all that is going on in technology. So there is no such thing as full information, and that we should stay humble. So it would be better to exercise restraint and keep that in mind. And with so many uncertainties, it is both safer and more just to allow as much freedom and individual choice as possible. Typically decry populist us versus them rhetoric, claiming that such rhetoric derives society. But in numerous countries, they have employed this very same rhetoric as a means of separating the good, obedient, vaccinated people from the evil, incorrigible, unvaccinated people. Canada's Freedom Convoy is a perfect example of how even in a country with reputation of niceness and stability, normal citizens are fed up with arrogant elites. So we need to be very careful of what to wish for. Energy policies have also been a part of this very dramatic topic in the past. And I would just like to present a couple of numbers before I close, and we can open to the next speaker and have a discussion on that. If we look at what has happened, to reaching net zero emissions in the EU by 2050 would require the EU to reach per capita emissions of India. You heard me right. Per capita GDP of the EU is by now $37,000. In India, it's 2,000. So imagine the step back that we would have just in order to safeguard this thing. So Germany is a poster child for irresponsible energy politics. The knee-jerk reaction against nuclear power in the wake of Fukushima forced Germany to increase imports of nuclear energy from France, as well as upping their own use of coal, and the importance of the automobile industry to the country, as well as the need to run solar panels, cooling towers, has meant that Germany has not seen the level of reduction of CO2 emissions that they desired. Actually, in contrast, the contrast between France and Germany is instructive. Nuclear makes up the largest source of electricity in France. Guess how much? It's 70.6%, and it's the highest percentage in the world. It manages to spend a little more than half as much of electricity while producing a tenth of the electricity-generated carbon emissions of its German neighbor. 34% of Germany's electricity is sourced from wind and solar, with natural gas serving as a necessary backup. As of 2019, German electricity prices were 45%, you heard me right, 45% higher than the European average. So renewables have played their part in the price rises. And in the case of Germany, they have contributed to electricity prices rising 50% since 2007. And all told, the costs are substantial. By 2025, Germany will have spent $580 billion US on renewables, the nuclear phase-out costing their citizens more than $12 billion per year. And from 1965 to 2018, the world has spent $2 trillion on nuclear and $2.3 trillion on solar and wind. And yet nuclear has produced twice as much electricity as solar and wind. So if you look at the logic of these policies, it is rather questionable, especially what you see when the different outcomes in the various capitals, or I'm just saying Brussels, and the shifts and the regulations that we see there. So nuclear would be a way forward for Europe, ensuring energy security, energy efficiency, and environmental sustainability, therefore a boon to the people of Europe. But again, Germany has dropped out, is now importing this very expensive source of energy from France, and by that doing harm to their industries. So green policies also harm developing countries, and we have to be careful because there is the myth of leapfrogging. Developing countries today have more energy-intensive industries as well as more energy-intensive consumption behavior compared to industrialized countries at the same level as in the past. So moving from wood or coal to solar and wind is feasible only if the latter can provide the same level of growth as conventional fossil fuels. And this tends to be forgotten in many of the panels where we only look into the future without taking action. And that's something that we need to consider. People, at least politicians, of course, want to be re-elected. We all know what Jim told us about the desire to do what the electorate wants them to do right now, and by paying with their own paying all those expensive bills with the taxpayers' money. But we also need to look into the future and take action now and plan. Seen over the past couple of weeks with whether it's the energy dependency on certain countries or whether it's the Green Deal and other things. We need to price those things in. There is a supply and demand side to everything. And this also means that we need to look into the costs of the policies that we take, that we act on right now. And I would kind of leave it with that and focus a little bit on Russia and Ukraine. And just to sum up that the trap Europe is in right now is definitely self-deserved, self-produced. We did not look into certain things long enough. And I would say the present Russia-Ukraine war is the only most classic example of elite suppression of the masses. Wars are never good for the average Joe who has to fight them. News reports of Russian soldiers who genuinely have no idea what they are doing in Ukraine. Instances of defection indicate that this offensive war was wanted by Putin. Sanctions against Russia have caused the ruble to plummet and firms to abandon the country en masse. Needless to say, Ukrainian soldiers and civilians are experiencing the worst of it in displacement and death. And the war is therefore harming not only Putin's soldiers, but also the people of Russia. And we have seen that sanctions have actually hardly worked in the long run. They harm the wrong people, and it's again short-noted. And this is why I think we need to be more humble and also look into the consequences of what we do. It's not only on the climate change topic. It's not only on trade wars. It's not on the energy dependency. It is true for, and also, of course, on the health front. It is true for everything. And there, let me just quote in the end the old Roman wisdom, "Si vis pacem para bellum," which means if you look for peace, you don't need the war. In other words, thank you very much. Looking forward to our conversation. These were just 3 examples where we could talk about elitism and suppression of information. And despite the fact that we have not only top-down but also bottom-up information these days with all the nice gadgets and tools, we need to be careful that not fake news are spread, but facts and figures. Again, let me remind you of Friedrich August von Hayek, who back then mentioned in the 70s that only the elites change a society, because back then it was only possible top-down. But now we have the advantage of spreading information, especially facts, bottom-up. And we should take the advantage of doing that. And the roadshow and an event like that, thank you again, Boaz, is one of the opportunities we have to make individuals more responsible and look into their own, and make them aware of the power the individual has. Thank you very much.